This podcast is part of the Treksphere Network.
To find more Star Trek-related content, visit Treksphere.com. As you know, this is the measure of an episode. What were you doing? Oh, I got it. Where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek proper Star Trek, and not just quality or poor TV. I got nothing for this one. I'll be Jonathan.
And I'm Paul. And the criteria by which we judge these episodes, number 1, is there science fiction explored in the plot? Number 2, is that science fiction novel or unique in some way? And number 3, is there a moral or ethical dilemma? Moral or ethical? Is there a difference between those two words? We always group them together.
We talked about this when we first were deciding this, and moral is more on a personal level, and ethical is more of a community level.
Oh, we've already repeating ourselves.
Great. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we're I don't know how far into the show when we finally figured out our third one.
I don't know. That's a good question.
I think it was 3 episodes ago, so it hasn't been too long.
What episode did we watch?
So weird. Season
Jonathan?
2, episode 2, Silence Has Lease.
Where Silence Has Lease.
Where Silence Has Lease. There it is.
Yeah, we didn't watch the episode. No.
Sorry. That just kind of worked out great. Where Silence Has Lease. There it is. That's where. Right there.
Found it.
No, I was pulling up the blurb and I couldn't find it. All right. And the blurb states, the Enterprise encounters a mysterious void in the otherwise matter-filled space. And when they move in closer to investigate further, it envelops them and they can't get out. What a stupid... yes, but it just sounds very lame and dull.
Well, they ran out of vocabulary juice, I guess, at the end there.
Right, and they got stuck.
Yeah. No movie.
Man, I thought this episode was great. I think that it did not stick the landing. It just muddled through in the last 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh, it's such a great, well, we can't talk about the ending yet, but I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
That it's surprising this is only the second episode of the second season.
Yeah.
And because the first season is sort of known for being just kind of lame. Right,
kind of stumbling through. And the season premiere of season 2 is The Body, or The Child, which is Troy magically having a baby.
Yeah, and I don't remember if that's a good episode or a bad episode. I don't know if it's...
I'm going to go with it's a very cheesy bad episode, but we'll find out. But yeah, and then they get to this one.
Yeah, it's almost as if maybe... this was supposed to be the opener. This seems like such a season opener type of thing. And it's so, hits the head on the nail.
Yeah. Yep, that's true.
Nail on the head?
Head on the nail.
You hit the nail. You hit the Ned on... Don't lead me down the wrong path.
You hit the Ned on the nail. Yep, that's exactly what you do.
With the whole, in terms of it being a proper Star Trek episode, absolutely is.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. It's so good. This is sort of like that other one, Timescape.
Right.
And the other one that we haven't seen, Cause and Effect, this sort of the trifecta in a way. It's the perfect mystery, science fiction, procedural, no BS.
Yeah. So I will say, having said that though, everyone here was the smartest person in the room, but everybody else was an idiot when that person was the smartest person in the room. Geordi says, and the rats said, you can keep the cheese, just get me out of the maze, and everybody kind of nods knowingly, that's kind of how we're all feeling. And then Dr. Pulaski later goes, it's a rat, it's like a rat in a maze. And Picard goes, what do you mean? Explain. How?
Meanwhile, he should have been saying, why does everyone keep using that metaphor?
Right? Who gives a rat's ass about this? Sorry, that was Cisco.
Nice. He's on this who gives a rat's ass about this? And he leaves.
I'll see myself out.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
I'm sorry. I just want to throw everything out that I thought, and then we can talk about the actual episode.
No, it's so true. This has so many great beats because starting with like the first thing that happens. So the first thing that happens is we cut to what would normally be under music under a captain's log of a left to right, the ship is going somewhere type of shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And instead, it opens in silence. No log, no music, no fanfare.
Mm-hmm.
And we even cut into the ship. We cut into the ship, and there's no music. We don't know what's going on.
Right.
We just see Data doing something. And then Picard walks out, and then the music starts, and the episode starts.
Wait, no. Picard steps out of his what is that called? Ready? Is it his ready room?
Ready room.
It is?
Ready
okay,
room.
okay. I was thinking that's
Star Trek.
the conference chamber. What? Like, where's?
No, that's on the other side. That's like
I know.
Totally.
But what is that place called? Is that the briefing room?
I don't know what they call that. Is that a conference room?
Man, if ever there was an episode, we're gonna get emails. This is the one.
Do they even go in there? They do go in there.
So anyway, John Pickard is like, no. So
in his pajamas.
So he steps out. He totally was. What was he wearing?
No, he was in his uniform. But anybody who's just watching this for the first time would think he's in pajamas.
So he steps out onto the bridge and then pauses a moment and thinks like maybe he walked on camera too early and starts to like turn around, but the door doesn't open and he's like, well, I'm too late now. I'm committed to it. This was probably the weakest part of the episode for me, you know. So we don't know anything. You're right. And then he goes down and he's pacing and he has a worried look on his face. And then Deanna, the empath, goes, "You're worried."
She uses her special powers to determine the undeterminable.
Right. It was amazing. I was like, that's quality writing right there. How did she know? Man, special powers. And then he says, "I'm just worried about Worf and Riker." And then we cut to the holodeck, and well, we don't know it's the holodeck. We cut to some deep jungle where they have.
I assumed it was Worf and Riker doing an escape room,
right? Or yeah,
that's what it felt like.
Yeah, or the move ahead, the Deep Space Nine game.
Oh, right! I totally forgot about that.
But there's those skull helmet creatures, which were really cool. I'm gonna be disappointed if this is the only time we ever see them because I thought that was a neat little.
It felt very He-Man villain to me. I don't know why.
Yeah. I mean, right? Why would a skull-headed creature seem like a He-Man?
But I knew intrinsically it wasn't Skeletor. He shows up later in the show, right. But it wasn't. It didn't even look. I wasn't like, oh, that's Skeletor. But it looked like a villain that's sort of Skeletor adjacent.
Right, like a Skeletor minion or a He-Man knockoff. Right,
something like that.
Yeah.
By the way, okay, so it turns out that this is Worf's calisthenics program. And another indication that our random episode generator is sentient. In the last TNG episode that we watched, his calisthenics program is referenced.
Oh, you're right. I totally.
How is this possible?
Right. Like, there's got to be, like, at
something
most
is going on.
5 episodes that talk about his calisthenics.
I can think of one, and that's the one we saw.
Right. Well, 2. The one that was where it was referenced, and then this one where we saw it.
And then this one, right.
But what's weird to me is they never talk about the safety protocols being lifted, and they never reinstate them if they were lifted. And so I don't understand why Riker is kind of having a panic saying, at ease, Lieutenant. Like, it was just very strange.
I'm assuming that even if the safety protocols in a holodeck are engaged, that real humans can kill other humans still. That if you have a knife, it doesn't just bounce off of you.
I mean, I guess if you brought a knife in, then
right,
yeah, you're not dealing with.
You could
just
strangle
life,
somebody.
right?
A human Worf could have strangled Riker.
Yeah,
I'm assuming.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Although I do want to know though, because I'm assuming that they're off, or the safety protocols are off because Riker is all beat up. They're both beat up. I mean, they're not bleeding, but they've obviously fallen down. And Riker does that really fun stunt where he slides around the pole and kicks the bad man.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if the safety protocols are engaged, can you effectively kind of jump off of large cliffs and you'll just bounce onto the ground? Or how does that work if you're actually falling from large distances?
I would imagine so. Like, you just kind of hit it as if you fell off a couch or something. So that's like the first 3 minutes of the episode. That's the cold open.
Yeah, it's still in the cold open because do they come across the void? I think they do in the cold open. This is where Data starts to shine for me, at least since the first season. This is where it's like, oh, this is why we love Data.
Right.
Little Data moment, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I like how Riker, you know, again, it's one of those things. Data's the smartest person in the room, and everybody else becomes an idiot. Like, Data says, I don't know. And Riker's like, you don't know.
Well, he must have said Data doesn't know everything.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I mean, they use him. He still is doing the thing where they say, Data, has there ever been a time where this has happened? He says, accessing.
Mm-hmm.
And they stopped doing that at a certain point. But this is the biggest demarcation of him moving from 60s robot to Data android. Because the first season is them trying to exploit all the jokes they possibly can that he's a robot.
Right.
And this is now not that. Although he's still kind of winking at the camera a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, there were many facial expressions that were facial expressions for somebody who has no emotion.
Well, he's trying to fit in.
Right.
He wants to be alive.
Yeah. I think the direction on him was to like give a very subtle, forced robot smile, and you know, and that's what he was doing. But I feel like if you're going to have that, then it needs to be called out. And I don't like, given the sobriety of the child, I can't imagine that they brought up that Data was going to start doing this. And so maybe it's like alluded to in this episode and actually flat out referenced later on. You know, kind of like how he grows a beard, or practicing sneezing, or his small talk protocol, or not protocol, program that he created. Do you remember this?
Yeah. Well, that's all first season stuff, right?
I don't think the small talk is. I think the small talk is in like the 4th season, and I think it comes up much later. Yeah,
it just felt like this is the first time I recognized the Data that I like in this in this episode. Versus all the stuff in the first season, which is like primordial Data.
Mm-hmm. And then the doctor comes on after they kind of like are scanning the void for a little while, and she kind of says to Picard, like, "May I?" You know, and just to explore it and kind of learn. And she tells Data, you know, keep enhancing, magnifying by, you know, however, by exponent of 10.
This was such a weird sequence to me.
Yes. And then she turns around and she's like, it knows what it's doing, right? Like, this
is that, I mean, okay, so that was why we had this scene, so she could insult the bridge officers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she comes in and Picard just lets her take over being captain for a second.
Yep.
And by take over, it's just like, well, we can go by powers of 10, so I just go by powers of 10. And just magnify by 10,000, 100,000. Yeah, and she's just like, I guess I'm going to have to accept that you are alive. It's like, it doesn't sound like you're accepting it. It sounds like you're being ordered to.
Yeah. Fine, Data.
Yeah, you're a person.
Pooter!
I'll leave now.
Well, we've all had our say. Because she took Crusher's place, like they wanted to put her on to remind people that, you know, that this is the new Doctor.
But anyway, so this is just such a great exploration of the mystery.
Yeah.
Because a good example of this is, so they shot a probe into the thing and it just disappears, right? So I feel like a regular, not science fiction show, it would have been done there. It's like, well, we lost the probe. It means this and this. Let's move on from the plot.
Right.
And they shoot 2 probes, and the same thing happens. And I feel like they don't learn anything extra from it.
Right.
But they're exploring it in a procedural way. And that is a good example of that. And they kind of do that throughout when the void envelops them, right? Mm-hmm. And then they drop a beacon. They want to see how far away they can get from the beacon. So they drop this little boom, boom.
They get enveloped by the void, and they're like, well, that was interesting. And then they turn around and start to fly out.
And it's not clear if they can still see the stars or not when they turn around.
Right. Well, and so what was cool about this is I'm sure you noticed there was no music.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, like they turn around and fly away, and they're all just sitting there, and there's no dialogue, there's no music, and this probably went on for at least 20 seconds, if not longer. Then finally, one of them is like, well, we should be out by now. And they start checking the coordinates, and that's when they drop the probe. And the probe for me, like the thing that threw it off for me was they heard it getting more and more faint, which if it's over the intercom, it probably wouldn't have been getting more and more faint. But then we hear it getting louder again, and they're like, "We see a beacon up ahead," and your probe is getting louder. Like, are you thinking it's catching up to you? Like, why are you confused by the fact that there is a probe up ahead and you hear it getting louder?
Here's what I think happened. I think that the sound of the probe was added later. I don't think it's in the script that they can actually hear the sound.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
And so they drop it, and it was supposed to be sort of this idea that, we're monitoring the probe or the beacon. It's not an actual, because they do like the Doppler effect on it.
They do, totally,
and,
as they're flying away from it, yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't make, because it would be it wouldn't be an actual sound that was making,
that's not
even
how
if it
space
was,
works.
well, you wouldn't be able to hear it, even if it was.
Right.
But in reality, it'd be digital anyway, so it wouldn't fall like that.
Right.
But I think that the reason the dialogue doesn't quite match up with the idea that they're actually hearing the beacon is that they couldn't hear the beacon. It was added later.
Right.
I guess because they felt like, well, we need to hear something, because it's just, as you said, there's no music, and they're just kind of standing there. We need some sort of element to marry these two problems that are happening.
Yeah, that's fair.
What happens next? Oh, they encounter the Romulan.
Oh, yeah.
And we get to see, so they fight the Romulan, and it just kind of blows up after one hit. And then they cut to Geordi. And he's like, yeah. He's like, where does this bloodlust come from, Geordi? It's like, this is a problem. This is before he takes solace, or not solace. What happens when you take comfort in something?
It takes comfort?
There's a word for that. Where he takes comfort in computers. Sexual comfort.
Okay, yeah.
It's before he found that outlet.
Right. Well, and it's interesting.
This is getting cut.
Why?
Because he's going to make a joke about Geordi being like fucking computers.
Yeah, I got it.
I screwed up. Yeah, but nobody else will.
Oh, no. I think we talk about it enough that like you can just leave it as takes comfort in computer programs, and
okay,
people will know what's up.
Okay.
Oh, this is the first time we're seeing the Romulans since the season 1 finale.
Right, and they are super prepared for what to do when they see a Romulan warbird.
Yep. Fire their one-hit destroyer.
I thought that was easy. I'm surprised they just start high-fiving each other.
So because of Geordi's and Picard saying that was too easy, I actually thought that I knew that they were being controlled by some kind of outside being, but I actually thought that the outside being was influencing their emotions to make them bloodthirsty.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But see, I love that. I love that they didn't do that. I know that they sometimes do that with aliens in this show, but I love that that's the difference between, we talked about this in an Operation Annihilate, where their expression of science fiction in the original series is very introverted or intrapersonal, psychological.
Right.
And NextGen is much more extroverted with their science fiction. They could have gone there with, what's his name that comes in later, Nagilum, where he was controlling their minds and stuff.
Right.
But they didn't. They did more of an external thing. Like, this is the science fiction. This is the physical aspect of what's happening, and not what psychological effect is happening on the crew.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And then the Yamato, the USS Yamato.
Yeah, you say Yamato, I say Yamato.
Nice. Did you write that down?
I didn't. It just came because there's somebody. Oh, it's Data. He keeps like it felt so forced. Like he has not been Data long enough for this to feel natural for him to say Yamato. Like every time he said Yamato, it felt like Brent Spiner was being like, oh, as an android, he would pronounce that properly. He would not say Yamato.
Yeah, it is true. Like, I feel like this was kind of a Data feature, this episode, because they go to him a lot. He's on screen, I feel like, way more than any other person besides Picard.
Yeah.
I guess Riker and Worf
and
their
Worf,
kind of little
right.
field trip. But
yeah, they were very buddy in this episode.
Yeah, they were, weren't they?
Yeah. Working out before their shift.
Yeah. They don't really strike me as buddy though. If I think about the series as a whole, I'm not like, oh, they're buds. Right?
Yeah. No, I would agree with that.
Riker doesn't really have buds.
So kind of along those lines, that's actually why I think Worf was on the show at this point, but that's why Thomas Riker and Worf do not cross paths at all, because they knew that Worf would immediately know that it wasn't Thomas Riker, or that it wasn't Will Riker.
I thought you could say they're the same person, that Worf dresses up as Thomas Riker. We never see them in the same room together.
What if? Like,
it'd be so great. But who's dressing up as who?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit more difficult for Worf to be dressing up as Thomas Riker. Like,
well, I mean, likewise the other way around, though. I mean, Worf is a much taller, bigger, like he's got bigger skull and everything. Like, I guess it's easier to add than it is to subtract.
Yes,
maybe you're right.
Right. And just imagining, like, Thomas Riker accidentally killed Worf and knew that he would get in trouble for it. So he's like, for the rest of the time, yeah, just he's got to keep up appearances.
I love it. So Riker and Worf beam over to the Yamato to explore and see what the hell's going on. Turns out it's totally empty. They go over and we kind of get the impression that they're being messed with at this point because they beam over and they're in different locations on the ship. Mm-hmm. And they have this whole bridge set piece where there's two bridges and they kind of have this weird loop thing. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of looping in this episode. Like they have the literal loop where they seem to be traveling in a circle when they drop the beacon, and then the bridge set piece is very much a loop where it's this never-ending circle, sort of an infinite circle.
Right. Well, I feel like for that it was they were getting their request fulfilled. Like they needed to get to the bridge. And so when they walked down the corridor and they opened up the doors, the bridge was right there, and every door led to the bridge. And so they were. I see. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good call. Yeah, it does feel like if you kind of think about this, eventually when we meet Nagilum, that he's this Q-esque character who can essentially do anything he wants. And it kind of implies that they were just sort of sitting there in a catatonic state, the entire crew, while this was all happening in their head.
Interesting, right?
Because it could have been, if he has all this power to create beings perfectly, because he does that later with Troy and Data.
Yeah.
It just kind of it could be that none of this happened.
Right.
It makes more sense. Sort of along the lines of our holodeck conversation. Why go through all the trouble to physically affect them in this way when you could just control their minds? It would be much easier.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if that was the original intent, and that's kind of what the writer was going for, and it just got a little lost in translation. Because that's the only way that the holodeck scene makes sense, other than it just kind of being a non sequitur cold open moment. But for it to actually play into the plot would go with what you were saying.
Yeah, and I wonder if this was a proto-Q type of thing. I guess Q was already in the show.
Q was already in.
I forgot about that. Yeah. It could have been Q. Maybe they wanted to keep Q more as a mischievous type of character and not someone who is this kind of cold, intellectual kind of thing. I mean, there was this theme of rats in a maze.
Right.
And I was wondering, speaking of the writing, if they were going for this commentary of the human arrogance where we kind of do the same thing to other things on this planet that Nagilum was doing to them. And they never really explore that other than referencing the metaphors of rat races and things like that we kind of do some pretty messed up stuff to other animals and we put them through tests and we kind of do all these things to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't really care.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of why I said, it just didn't stick the landing, because at the end, Nagilum comes back, and he says, I was observing and I have some hypotheses about you, or, some results. Do you want to hear them? And then he starts talking about who we are as a species, and it was like, where did you get this from your observations?
That actually lends more credibility to my theory that it's all taking place in their head, because he wasn't just watching them through a microscope. He was actually inside of the entire crew's head,
right?
Kind of listening to their thoughts and seeing what they were seeing and feeling what they were feeling, and that's why he said those things. And I do not believe that Picard would not take him up on actually learning about what Nagilum learned.
Right.
At the end. I don't believe. There's a lot of things I don't believe. Like, I don't believe that there's not a Snapchat filter that has the Nagilum, makes your face like Nagilum's face.
There's got to be.
There's got to be now.
Yeah, there needs to be one.
I would use it.
Yeah. Well, and So kind of to speak to that point really quick, just about how powerful Nagilum is. So he kills off that crew member. This was a very GIF and meme episode.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, there were quite a few things from it where I was like, oh, now I know where that's from. So he kills off, what was his name? I want to say it was Antilles, but I'm not sure that's right. Kills him off and then says, I need to learn about death, so I will be killing a lot of you, up to a third, maybe half.
Right.
And then the next scene, they're in the briefing room discussing this, and I was so confused at that point about why Nagilum let them go off and discuss it, or why he wasn't killing people off while they were discussing it.
There was this weird implication that the experiment was going to start in an hour,
right?
And we never got that information, but everybody was acting that way. And I agree with you. It was very strange. Like, why wouldn't he just start his experiment immediately?
Right.
And there would be this urgency that I think you would get on the show Enterprise, but you don't get here. There's always this kind of very slow pace on this show where they have to talk about it,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I have to say that the solution to the problem of Nagilum killing half the crew is Picard's solution is to kill all of the crew.
Right.
That makes no sense.
That makes
How
no
is
sense. Yeah. And Dr. Pulaski even says so.
Well, Nagilum even says so later too, and he's right.
Right.
I don't understand. I understand that you want to rebel against your captor.
Yeah.
But that's not how you do. That's not a good captain.
I mean, they do raise the argument of, at least this way, we are in control, as opposed to watching random people die helplessly. But absolutely. Like,
it still doesn't. I still can't make it make sense, other than you just want to show him.
Right. I mean, yeah. Like he does not get the not satisfaction. I mean, I guess to a certain extent, but not in like a personal pleasure way. Well, again, also kind of. Anyway, he's not given.
It'd be the same thing. It'd be the same thing as if we had mice who we were experimenting on, and one of the mice says, "Screw you! I'm not going to take this," and he just jumps off the thing and kills himself. And we wouldn't be like, "No!" We would be like, "Oh, let's get another round."
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't care. It's like, we make these by the millions. You think I care? Like, it wasn't going to inconvenience this all-powerful being.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, oh, I'll just get another ship.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't understand. I felt like we missed something. Like, there was a very specific scene that was cut out that gave us information that he really wanted Picard. Nagilum really wanted Picard for some reason, and he had to do this experiment. Like, there was some sort of exchange that we just are missing now.
Mm-hmm. And you saying he really wanted Picard, like, I understand why this is the case for the writers and the guest stars and all that kind of thing, but I just realized that whenever it's one of the 7 main who another alien race wants, they're always talked out of it. But when it's a guest star that the other alien race always wants, they always give them up. Like, either they realize it's for the greater good and so the person goes, or the person is like, no, this is what I want to do.
Well, if you think about the guy who just shows up driving the ship, the red shirt, which, by the way, I thought red was command in this paradigm. But anyway, the new guy who's driving the ship, I'm like, when he first shows up, so Riker and Worf beam over and there's a new guy driving the ship, not Wesley.
Right.
I'm like, oh, he's dead.
Yeah.
He's so dead.
Where
like,
did
when
Wesley
is he going to
go?
die? I don't know. He's off duty.
Right. His shift was over.
It's nap time.
Wesley, it's getting a little intense in here. Why don't you go take your nap?
Okay. And he's like dragging his blankie.
Right. But yeah, such a weird thing because you're right. Like, when Worf and Riker left, so did Wesley. And he was never heard from again. Like,
Jordan was like, yes.
Right. It would have been great if they brought Wesley back after Antilles died or whatever, and like, then it's a question of like, was he on his lunch break? Could that have been Wesley? Like, did he leave and he was on call for the rest of like the next 12 hours? And so they're like, we do need you back. Your replacement died.
I like the idea that for the entire second season, they give Wesley survivor guilt.
Right.
Where he just went to the bathroom,
Yeah.
And it just happened to be that's when Nagilum kills the other guy.
Right.
And he can't get over it. He cannot get over it. And that's what drives him to leave the Enterprise.
Yeah.
With what's his name?
There you go. With the Wanderer or the Watcher or
I think it's the
Walker.
Wanderer.
Texas Walker.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
Anyway,
so they kill the guy. He's like, you can't let you do that, and it looks like a pretty gruesome death. It looks like something crazy is going on.
Whatever it was.
I guess that is evidence against my theory that it's all taking place in their head, because you don't have to kill people when everything is just some sort of hallucination.
Yeah, but if you're trying to see how death works, like, and if you're able to control somebody's mind in the way where they cannot tell the difference between dream and reality, absolutely, you'd be able to kill them.
Right, but you don't learn anything just by torturing someone and them dying. I think that someone like Nagilum would know that's what happens when a being dies, is they stop functioning. I think that when he said, I want to know about death, I think he wanted to know how do other people react to death? That's what I got from it. What lengths will you go to stop yourselves from being dead?
Right.
So when they decide to turn on the self-destruct, it was a great moment for me, because you know how I hate it when they say self-destruct, because it's not self-destruct. They're turning on a destruction. It's not like the ship is self-destructing.
Yes.
They say auto-destruct.
Yes. I didn't think of it until you just started talking about it, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's what you're going to say.
That is much more acceptable.
Right.
I accept that. That makes sense. It's an automatic. I'm not manually destructing the ship. I'm automatically destructing it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it's not like the ship is committing suicide.
Right. The machine, well, it kind of is, because the machine is automatically destroying itself. And as a machine, anything a machine does, it is automatic.
Well, it's like autopilot.
Right.
You have to push the button.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
For the machine to do it.
Right. Right.
I like it. Right. Yeah. So the next big scene that happens is Troy comes in, tries to convince Picard not to destroy the ship, and then Data comes in and tries to convince Picard not to destroy the ship. We find out it's Nagilum posing as those two people, and there's this weird inconsistency of power here, because he can just kill somebody with the snap of a finger, and he seems to have utter control over space and time, and very likely over their minds. They never say they never say that he has any kind of limit to his power.
Right.
So why would he need to do any of this? Why the charade? Why the pageantry of embodying other people from the ship and trying to get into the mind of Picard? Why?
Right.
Like, it would seem like because they set up humans as being these mice to Nagilum, why does he care that much?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and there's a level of inconsistency there as well, because he is able to create a starship that they are able to go to and walk around, and he is able to control their different systems on the ship, but he's not able to stop the auto-destruct.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We've had this discussion before about another one, too. It was, the one, may this be your last battleground, where this person was like millions of years old and seemed to have power over matter.
Right.
Could not just turn off the Enterprise's self-destruct.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You're very right about that.
This is kind of, why the episode was great, and it was a good slow burn and a slow reveal, and they're genuine scientists trying to understand what's happening. And it's almost like when Nagilum shows up, when we finally find the source of where this is coming from, first off, they didn't figure it out on their own. He just revealed himself to them. And at that point, there's just no explanation for anything after that. He says he's going to start killing them, and then suddenly they're in the briefing room talking about whether or not what they want to do about that. And then they set the auto-destruct, and Nagilum has already shown that he can control the electronics, but he doesn't stop the auto-destruct. And then at the end, kind of where we are now, they leave the auto-destruct on until the last possible moment, where, again, they even talked about it. He's like, you could have just said yes. And, Riker's like, I wanted to waste as much time as possible. And then he's in his ready room, and Nagilum shows up. And he's not fazed by that at all. They believe they're in the clear. They thought they were out of the void, and most likely they are, unless the rest of the 6 seasons is happening in their heads. But Nagilum shows up on the screen, and he just starts having a conversation with them, and then Nagilum leaves. That meant that Nagilum was not confined to the void, which meant Nagilum could be anywhere at any time.
Yeah, I got the impression that Nagilum was everywhere.
Yeah.
That he was creating the void as a point of curiosity to attract them into it. It was the cheese in the trap type of thing. Yeah, and it's a very dark ending. It does sort of lend the idea that, well, how do they know that they're not in this experiment anymore?
Right.
They have no way of knowing. But it's sort of the thing where it's like a mind fuck, where somebody says, well, we're in a simulation right now. It's very likely we're in a simulation right now. And so if you think about that for too long, it becomes all consuming.
Mm-hmm.
You have to stop thinking about it because you can't do anything about it. But they would be in the same, there must be at least one crew member on the Enterprise after the Nagilum incident who went crazy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I could totally see that. Yep.
Because I would go crazy. Like, how do we know? How do we know that Nagilum isn't just watching us, waiting to kill one of us? How do we know this isn't some grand plan?
Right.
We could be sitting catatonic in that same spot 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And have no way of knowing. Yeah.
No way of knowing. They would never be able to know. Not with an all-powerful being. Q could be, I guess he shows up before Nagilum. That doesn't mean maybe this is the first time Nagilum showed himself. Maybe all of reality.
Well, so you saying this, like, that would have been an amazing episode. I mean, it's one of those things where if you liked any of the episodes between, then it might be really terrible. But what if, like, 6 or 7 episodes later, we get Q, and he's trying to explain to us that we are still in the Nagilum experiment, and he's there to get us out.
That would be so great. It would be so great if Nagilum shows up in Picard season 2, and
and it turns out everything we've seen so far,
everything, and the last shot of Picard, of the whole series, is him waking up. They get all the actors back and they digitally de-age them, and they're still on the set of the original NextGen ship, and they wake up.
Right.
That's the last shot.
And Picard's like, let's go home.
Engage. No, they could stay old. They would have been, they wouldn't have been, what do you call that when you stasis? They wouldn't be in stasis. They would have aged just sitting in their chairs.
No, Paul, no.
Yeah, that's better.
It's
better.
It's way too dark. Like, what is that? That's like 20 years of their lives.
Sitting there.
Yeah.
They were sitting there. And they were kept in stasis, but Nagilum did not do them the favor of
maintaining their age. Yeah.
Because he didn't care.
Right. No.
This is my rebellion of the end of this episode. Because the end of this episode is so not what, I mean, I think they didn't have the balls to end it on the note and the tone that it should have.
Right.
Because Picard has that final discussion with Nagilum, where Nagilum kind of has this passive threatening type of thing.
How you lasted as long is beyond me, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And Picard is obviously worried. And he goes in, and it should have been like the ending to that famous episode that we haven't gotten to yet, where the crew members are kidnapped from the ship into this alternate dimension, and it's this very horror-esque, I wish I could remember the name of that episode. So that one ends on a super dark note, kind of the way Conspiracy ends, which is bad shit is coming.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So the way it actually ends, though, is like, we've got more work to do. Let's go. Ba, 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 da, da, da. And it's just like, wait, remember when the guy died a terribly gruesome death, like maybe 10 minutes ago?
Right.
Remember when that happened? Like, why is everybody okay with this now?
Yeah. Yep. That's the problem.
Yeah. I hated it. They had such a great thing going.
Yeah. I think they needed to spend more time having their discussion with Nagilum. If a rat was able to talk and was sentient enough to present its argument, I really don't think that we would go, yeah, we're still going to kill you.
That's true, but I don't think that Nagilum has any reverence or respect for humans.
So then how would you suggest the movie or the episode would end?
I think that they made Nagilum too powerful. They should have put some sort of dimension to him that limited his powers. And so I don't know how you do that in the paradigm that they set up, but give him something to escape from. But the fact that they had that discussion out of the void either means that they're still in the void,
right,
and never left, or that Nagilum can go anywhere at any time and just lost interest in Picard, I guess.
Yeah.
He was no longer eligible for the experiment. It's like sort of catching a fish and throwing it back because it was too small.
Right. Yeah. So kind of along those lines, the other thing that I thought was going to happen was after he had that conversation, one of the helmsmen would call in and say, "Yeah, we just, sir, it turns out we were still in the void and we just left it again." So there was some kind of solidification that yes, they had still been in the void and they were being tricked, and Nagilum just let them go.
Yes.
And then he could have used that Kirk line, "Let's get the hell out of here."
Right. You couldn't use Nagilum as the source of information that made them for sure determine that they were no longer under his control, because he would just lie.
Right.
You'd not be able to use that, so you would need an external source. But how do you do that with an all-powerful being?
Right. You have a character who doesn't have that level of credibility, so this would be one of those times where you just have to accept that this time he is telling the truth. But I think that if he said, "I will let you go," and then they said, "Sir, it appears we just left the void," I feel like that would be, especially at the end of the episode, you could kind of do what we were doing, which is discuss, like, did he really let them go? But you would have to just kind of accept that he did concede and release them out of the void.
Right. I mean, I guess you could set up at the beginning, Nagilum could have been more forthcoming with what the experiment was. And so at the end, where he says, "When you did this, you made my experiment null and void."
Right.
And so that's why.
Or I received everything that I needed to know.
Right. But see, even then, I wouldn't trust Nagilum. This is the problem with an all-powerful being, is that you can't trust them.
Right.
And in a way, they kind of, for some reason, they're able to negate that with Q. Q is truly an all-powerful being, but we never get the sense that he's altering people's reality continuously.
Right.
Because we could still be in that trial from Encounter at Farpoint.
Which, he kind of showed that we are in all good things. He's like, you've always been on trial.
I just meant that this could have been some sort of affectation. The universe, as Picard knows it, could be all being created by Q.
Right.
And maybe it is. I mean, see, that's the problem with magic in science fiction. Is you can't mix them.
Right.
And they walk that line pretty well with Q, I guess. Once you start to think about it too much with Q, you're like, well, why wouldn't he just be controlling everything? And this is just Q's playground, and what we're seeing is not reality or can't be trusted as such. But I never think that as much as I do with this episode. For some reason.
Right. Yeah, there's something about how Q is presented that you just kind of accept that he is not that omniscient. Well, I think probably because he's a lot more interactive, and so I'm trying to think if he ever lies.
That's a good point. Q doesn't really ever seem to lie.
Yeah, like there's no need because he's so powerful. So when he says, "I'll let you go," like you...
Yeah, I guess the reason you lie is to avoid consequence of something, and Q does not have any need to avoid anything.
Right. Well, and for some reason, Nagilum just gave off that vibe of just being so impartial that he didn't care whether or not he lied.
Right. I guess the mere fact that Nagilum shows himself makes it feel like that he isn't just entirely, absolutely cold in terms of how he feels about Picard. He actually wants to have a discussion with them. Taking everything at face value, which I guess we can't, but the idea that he is willing to pull back the curtain and actually have a conversation is to show that something is different, that he actually is intrigued in some way, and therefore might not be lying to Picard about how he's out of the void, although Nagilum never says that he is. I don't think. So I would think that if you were truly cold, if you truly were the scientist experimenting on the rat,
right,
you wouldn't care to stop your experiment and have a discussion with the rat. You would just kill it and move on, or just let it go and move on. There wouldn't be a need to do that. So the mere fact that he does kind of shows that the Enterprise is special, and so therefore maybe they were released from the void. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of depends. At that point, it just depends on the compassion and the impartiality of the experimenter.
Right, which as far as we can tell, Nagilum is not compassionate.
Right. Yeah. So again, we're just circling back around to this is why it didn't stick the landing. Like there was too much. There was too much presented that was not adequately resolved.
Right.
Which is frustrating. So then the question becomes, Was it a good episode?
Yeah. You mean a proper episode or a good episode?
Was it a good episode?
I thought it was a good episode. I felt like you're right. It doesn't stick the landing. But that's kind of the great thing about science fiction is that it doesn't end. It's all middle.
Right.
And so when you have to end it, you kind of have to expect there to be it to be awkward a little bit. That how do you end something like this? And they were, this was only their second season, the very beginning of the second season. So they didn't know to just move on, just muscle through it, just go.
Or to present things in a way that, kind of Chekhov's gun, which is kind of ridiculous for a writer's room not to think of that, but to have something set up near the beginning that will allow them to get out at the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what we're watching next.
No.
Fallen Hero from the Star Trek The Enterprise. And the blurb says, Enterprise is planning a trip to the relaxation planet Risa when it gets an urgent request from the Vulcan High Command. And this is episode 22 of season 2 of Star Trek Enterprise. That was said so out of order. Good luck with that.
Season 2 or season 1?
Season 1, like I said from the beginning.
I thought you said season 2.
Well, you thought wrong. I said season 2, 1.
Oh, well, we have the videotape. We can go back and look at that. Can't
right. We can, but nobody will.
All right, well, I guess let's go watch it.
Right, let's go watch the season 1 episode 22 episode Fallen Hero.
I've been Paul.
I've been Jonathan.
And this has been The Measure of an Episode.
As you knew.